The grey, watery light of a London dawn was filtering through the grimy, shattered stained glass windows of the chapel as we finally emerged from that place of violence and desperation. The air, though still carrying the chill of the night, felt fresh and clean. A welcome antidote to the musty, clawing atmosphere of decay and death we had left behind. The immediate life-or-death struggle was over, but the aftermath, with its tangled web of legal, moral, and personal consequences, was just beginning. The scene outside the chapel was one of controlled, official chaos. A cordon of uniformed police officers held back a growing crowd of curious onlookers, the residents of the rookery drawn from their beds by the sounds of the confrontation and the promise of a spectacle. Their faces, pale and pinched in the early morning light, were a mixture of fear, resentment, and a grim, detached curiosity. We were outsiders here, and the drama that had unfolded in their midst was just another brief, violent interruption in the long, slow grind of their daily lives. Inspector Lestrade, his chest puffed out with a self-important proprietary air, was in his element. He bustled about, issuing orders, directing his men, a small, triumphant bulldog who had, with a great deal of assistance, finally brought a great beast to heel. He was already composing the narrative for his superiors, a story in which his own role would be central, and Holmes is no doubt relegated to a footnote. Lord Vance, wrapped in a heavy police blanket, his face still ashen with the shock of his ordeal, was being gently guided towards a waiting carriage. As he passed us, he paused, his eyes meeting Holmes's. There was a profound, unspoken communication in that brief glance. A mixture of immense gratitude, deep-seated shame, and the dawning, painful realization that his rescue was not an end to his troubles, but the beginning of a new, more public form of reckoning. His reunion with Lady Vance, which took place a short while later in the sterile, impersonal environment of a Scotland Yard office, was a scene of quiet, restrained emotion. She had been summoned from her home, her face a mask of anxious dread. The sight of her husband, alive but so visibly broken, seemed to drain the remaining strength from her. She did not rush to him, didn't fall into his arms in a torrent of relieved tears. Instead, she simply stood before him, her eyes searching his. And in that long, silent moment, a whole lifetime of shared secrets and unspoken truths seemed to pass between them. It was Lord Vance who finally broke the silence. "Eleanor," he said, his voice a hoarse, cracked whisper, "I'm sorry. For everything." It was a simple, inadequate phrase, yet it carried the weight of 20 years of guilt and deception. It was the beginning of a confession, a first tentative step on the long, arduous road to atonement. Holmes and I did not linger to witness this private, painful reconciliation. Our part in that particular drama was over. We retreated to another office, where Holmes, over a cup of strong, hot tea that did little to dispel the deep, bone-weary chill of our ordeal, gave Lestrade a concise, edited version of the events that had led to the final confrontation. He laid out the facts of the case, the Quetta payroll robbery, the formation of the Crimson Shadow, the systematic hunting of the officers involved. He gave Lestrade the names, the dates, the evidence. He built a solid, irrefutable case against Moran and his now imprisoned followers, a case that would stand up in any court of law. He was, as always, generous in his praise of the official force, giving Lestrade and his men credit for their bravery and their assistance. He knew that a little flattery went a long way in maintaining his delicate, often strained relationship with Scotland Yard. "A fine piece of work, Inspector," he concluded, his tone one of sincere, if slightly exaggerated, admiration. "You have dismantled a dangerous and violent organization and brought a master criminal to justice. The City of London owes you a debt of gratitude." Lestrade beamed, his chest swelling with pride. "All in a day's work, Holmes," he said, with a dismissive wave of his hand. "We have our methods, you know." The fate of the other members of the Crimson Shadow, the broken, vengeful soldiers who had been the instruments of Moran's diabolical plan, was a more complex and troubling matter. They were murderers, yes, but they were also victims. They were men who had been driven to violence by a profound and unaddressed injustice. Holmes, in his conversation with Lestrade, made a subtle but firm plea for leniency. "They are not common criminals, Inspector," he argued, his voice taking on a more serious philosophical tone. "They are soldiers who were betrayed by their commanders and failed by the very system of military justice that was supposed to protect them. They are a product of a great wrong. In prosecuting them, let us not forget that." Whether Lestrade or the courts would heed his plea was another matter. The wheels of justice, once set in motion, are often deaf to the nuances of human suffering. But Holmes had planted the seed, had introduced a note of moral complexity into a situation that the law would prefer to see in simple, black and white terms. Our business at Scotland Yard was finally concluded. As we prepared to leave, we had one final brief encounter with the architect of the entire affair. We passed him in a corridor, being escorted from the interrogation room to his cell. Colonel Sebastian Moran, the big game hunter, the master strategist, the right hand of Professor Moriarty, was now just another prisoner in the vast impersonal machinery of the law. He was no longer the confident, arrogant man we had confronted in the chapel. He was diminished, his face pale and drawn, his eyes holding a cold, empty darkness. The fire of his ambition had been extinguished, leaving only the dead ashes of his defeat. He stopped as he saw us, and for a moment his eyes met Holmes's. There was no remorse in his gaze, no flicker of guilt or regret. There was only a cold, profound hatred, the pure, undiluted venom of a predator that has been brought to bay. "You have not won, Holmes," he hissed, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. "You have merely postponed the inevitable. The game is not over. It is never over." "The game, Colonel," Holmes replied, his voice calm and steady, "is most certainly over for you. You have played your hand, and you have lost. You will have a great deal of time to reflect on your mistakes in the solitude of your prison cell." Moran's lips twisted into a sneer, a final defiant gesture of contempt. Then he was gone, led away by his jailers, a fallen prince of the underworld, on his way to a new, more constrained kingdom. The journey back to Baker Street was a quiet, contemplative one. The city was now fully awake, the streets teeming with the bustling, chaotic energy of a new day. But for Holmes and me, it felt as if we were moving through a different world, a world still shrouded in the shadows of the night's events. We were both physically and emotionally drained, the long adrenaline-fueled ordeal having taken a heavy toll. The familiar cluttered comfort of our rooms at 221B was a welcome sanctuary, a haven from the storm we had just weathered. Mrs. Hudson, our long-suffering landlady, greeted us with a cry of alarm, her face a mask of concern at our battered and disheveled appearance. She bustled about, lighting a fire, preparing a hot breakfast, her gentle maternal fussing a comforting balm to our frayed nerves. For the rest of the day, we rested. I, for my part, fell into a deep, exhausted sleep, my dreams a chaotic jumble of dark chapels, narrow ledges, and the cold, swirling waters of the Thames. Holmes, however, did not sleep. When I finally awoke in the late afternoon, I found him sitting in his usual armchair, his violin across his knees, playing a series of soft, melancholic airs. It was his way of processing the events, of bringing order to the chaos, of soothing his own restless, formidable mind. He had changed into his familiar worn dressing gown, and the air was thick with the comforting, acrid aroma of his shag tobacco. The events of the past few days seemed, in the warm, fire-lit glow of our living room, like a distant, feverish dream. "You have been reflecting on the case, Watson," he said, without opening his eyes, his bow still moving slowly across the strings of his violin. It was, as always, a statement, not a question. "I have," I admitted. "It was a dark and terrible business, Holmes. A story of greed and betrayal that has ruined the lives of so many." "Indeed," he murmured, his music a soft, sad counterpoint to his words. "And it is a story that is far from over. Lord Vance must now face the consequences of his past actions. He may have escaped Moran's knife, but he cannot escape the judgment of the law or of his own conscience. And Lady Vance, she must now live with the knowledge that the man she loves is not the man she thought he was." He fell silent, his music filling the quiet of the room. It was a lament for the fallen, for the victims of the Crimson Shadow, but also for the perpetrators, for the broken men who had been twisted by injustice into instruments of violence. As I sat there, listening to the sad, beautiful music, I found myself reflecting on the nature of my friend's work. He was a man who walked in the darkest corners of the human soul, who confronted the very worst of which humanity is capable. And yet, he never lost his own sense of moral clarity, his own unwavering belief in the power of reason and justice. He was a strange, complex, and often difficult man, but he was also a great one. And I felt a profound sense of privilege to be his friend, his colleague, his chronicler. Our quiet reflections were interrupted by the arrival of the evening post. Among the usual assortment of letters and bills was a small, elegant envelope, addressed to Holmes in a fine feminine hand. He opened it and read the contents, a faint wry smile touching his lips. It was a letter from Lady Vance. It was a letter of profound, heartfelt gratitude for the rescue of her husband, and for the uncovering of the truth, however painful it might be. Enclosed with the letter was a check, a sum so generous that it took my breath away. It was a fortune, a king's ransom, a testament to the depth of her gratitude and the extent of her relief. "Well, Watson," Holmes said, holding up the check with a theatrical flourish, "it seems our little adventure has been a profitable one. Crime may not pay, but the solving of it, it appears, can be quite lucrative." He did not seem particularly interested in the money itself. For him, the true reward was the intellectual thrill of the chase, the satisfaction of bringing a complex and challenging puzzle to a successful conclusion. The money was merely a pleasant, if not entirely necessary, byproduct. The aftermath was a time of quiet reflection, of tying up loose ends, of returning to the familiar rhythms of our life at Baker Street. The storm had passed, and the city of London, that great indifferent beast, had already moved on, its attention captured by new dramas, new tragedies. But for those of us who had been caught in the eye of that storm, the memories would linger. The image of the crimson shadow, that stark, brutal symbol of a long festering wound, wouldn't be easily forgotten. It was a reminder of the dark hidden currents that flow beneath the surface of even the most civilized societies. A testament to the enduring power of the past to shape and to destroy the present. The case was closed, but the story, I knew, would stay with me forever.